Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. Hang with it.
Nathan Nerdarch.
Nerdarch is Ted.
And we can continue our Learn to Play D&D series. This time we're doing an intro to D&D races, the Gnome. Jump down the description below where you can find Nerdarchy, the newsletter, game weekly tips, as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
All right, so we're jumping back into our beginner's guide to Dungeons and Dragons, and today we're talking gnomes.
So gnomes, you can find them on page 35 of the player's handbook for 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Now, these aren't the little creatures that you see, running around in gardens throughout, modern day, but there is some semblance.
They don't all wear red hats.
Yeah, they're not the garden variety nor the David variety, if you guys are old enough to get those references. But gnomes are semi-fey-like creatures of the forest and the earth. And, in previous editions, they were always referred to as, the cousins of dwarves. But in 5th edition, they have their own identity. They're their own people. And we get a couple varieties of them.
Absolutely. We have the forest gnome and the rock gnome.
Right, and we're going to get into those in a little bit. So they all share some generic traits, though, being a gnome.
Yeah, gnomes, they tend to all be energetic and enthusiastic. They're kind of like... It's like children in the discovery. They all like to check out inventiveness and creativeness as like their main go-tos for their personalities.
And they can kind of be like pranksters and jovial.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're also similar in halflings by being one of these smaller races. They're usually around 3 foot tall and like 40 to 50 pounds.
Yeah, so they're going to suffer from some of the same issues as the halfling, and it's probably why they're pranksters and so jovial. It's their way of being known and coming to the forefront by the larger folk.
It's like, well, if you're going to associate with me being a kid, I might as well act like one.
They're going to be a little bit slower than the bigger folk, and they average like 3 foot tall. Like you said, they're small like halflings.
Well, I mean, when you're shorter, you're going to have less of a stride, so yeah, you're not going to make it as far.
But the one thing all gnomes kind of share is their natural cunning, and they're a bit more studious than a lot of the other races. One of their primary stat is intelligence.
Absolutely, and as you said, they're that studiousness and that magic involved in them that actually allows them to shrug off certain harmful magical effects that affect their mental stats.
It's true. They're very hardy when it comes to that. And now we have two different varieties, like you mentioned, the forest gnome and the rock gnome, or also referred to as the tinker gnome.
Right. Now the forest gnome, they're the ones that are a little bit more dexterous, and they get along well with the creatures of the wild.
Yeah, they can use gestures and simple phrases to speak with small beasts. And they're also kind of like trickstery in the way that they have the ability to do minor illusions.
Yes, they're a natural spellcaster. They're nimble. They're fast. They're in tune with the wild things of the forest.
No, that's one of the few things that actually allows you to just naturally, in this game, talk to animals. So if you're talking about something small, they can communicate simple ideas to it.
Well, it's defined as small woodland creatures.
Right.
So anything normally you can find in a forest. So it's just an interesting thing that forest gnomes can do.
Stuff you'd normally be labeled crazy for doing, talking to squirrels and bunnies and stuff. These can actually talk to squirrels and bunnies.
Yeah, it's what they do. And this might be the throwback to the David the Gnome.
Yeah, it does feel David the Gnome-ish, yeah.
And I've seen that come up where players playing a forest gnome have actually used that ability to gather information or to help solve problems because they got the woodland animals to do it for them.
Right, or it's just a fun piece of role playing for the game.
Absolutely.
So we talked all about the forest gnome. What about the rock gnome?
So the rock gnome, this is the one that actually makes me feel like these are the ones that are connected more towards the dwarfish gnomes you had said earlier that
it harkens back to being like the cousins of the dwarves,
right? Because these are the ones that actually want to make things, and we talked in our dwarf video about them always being involved in making stuff. Well, this gnome they do that.
So much so, all gnome player characters start off with proficiency in the Tinker tools.
Right. So they're not going to pull out the smith tools that the dwarves usually use, but they're going to make stuff.
And right off the bat, there might be more options that your DM has for you, but right in the player's handbook, you have 3 options for Tinker's toys that they can make. You have a fire starter, which is basically ye old lighter. They can make a music box, or they can make a toy soldier, or toy animal, toy something that just kind of walks around, a wind-up toy.
Right. Well, I mean, and who doesn't want to have one of those when you're already being associated with being a kid or kid sized? You're like, well, I'm going to make toys for all the little children.
Yeah, they're also super into all types of lore dealing with artifice and alchemy. So what is it? Alchemical objects, magic items, and technological devices. They get the kind of add their proficiency bonus twice instead of once when they are considering the history of that stuff. So.
They're just really good at it.
Yeah.
They're much better at it when they come across stuff, maybe ancient devices or new technology. The person that's going to be able to figure it out, if anybody's going to figure it out, it's going to be a rock gnome. And that's why they're also kind of referred to a tinker gnome as well, sometimes. Also, the other thing is that, well, we didn't bring up, is they're actually the sturdier of the 2 cousins of gnomes. They get their secondary stat is their constitution, so that's going to make them hardier, more hit points, more, the ability to throw off poisons and things like that. They're just sturdy.
Absolutely. So you combine that intelligence and constitution, they make really good wizards.
Well, all gnomes make really good wizards, and I feel like they all kind of lean towards illusions for their favorite school.
Right.
If you're going with that, and it also ties into a lot of their lore and stuff like that as well. So let's get into it then. What are gnomes good at being? We already said wizards, so anything using intelligence, they're going to excel at. And in your player's handbook, you really only have one.
Yeah, that leaves only the wizard. But being if you go with forest gnome, being dexterous, they could be anything that is going to use that, because as we've said before, dex is kind of like our super stat. So you're gonna enjoy being a good rogue because that's their primary stat. They could be any kind of ranged combatant, because dex is going to work off of that as well.
So yeah, obviously dex, pretty much everybody but the paladin and a barbarian need dex. They're going to benefit from that. So I really think they also make really thematic druids and rangers, even though they're not statted optimally for a druid, but for a ranger that could work range based attacks, as well as a forest gnome is just thematic for anything that's
Absolutely.
woodland. Yeah, so your wizards, your rangers, your rogues, these are going to be probably your ideal forest gnomes if you're going with optimized mechanically. Of course, you can play anything you want for fun.
And anything in the same line is going to work out well with the rock gnome, because being hardier, that bump to constitution, that just means that you're going to have the access to more hit points, so you're going to survive longer.
Yeah, we with your rock gnome, essentially, like Ted said, anything with a high constitution is going to be extremely helpful. But then there's like particular classes that excel even more so from your high constitution, like your warrior classes. So both sub races of gnome, no matter whether you're going with a dex-based fighter or a strength-based fighter, are ideal for building your Eldritch Knight. An Eldritch Knight requires intelligence as one of their stats in order to do their spellcasting, so you're going to benefit from that as well. So I feel like of all the character classes in the PHP, the Eldritch Knight seems well suited for the gnome if you're not going to just straight up play a wizard with one.
Right. And you could say, I mean, either of them work well for either. But you could focus, okay, well, if I wanted to do a ranged one, you could work with your forest, or you could take your rock gnome and be your melee Eldritch Knight.
Yeah, so it works really well. Now, and both of them have cool thematic abilities that don't necessarily have anything to do with any one particular class. So it's going to add something different and new no matter which way you decide to go with it. And of course, as we said, you can always play whatever you want. We're just pointing out some of the optimized choices for this particular race.
Absolutely.
And a quirky thing about gnomes we didn't mention previously, but can come up with character building, is that their names. They're really into having a lot of different names from a lot of different people. And sometimes you cut that down for like if you're talking to a human or some other race for interaction purposes, you're gonna only have like 3 or 4 names. But everybody's got a name for your character, like nicknames and stuff like that. So they tend to have the more ridiculous name, the better. And that's just whenever you're thinking about a character.
Role playing wise, a gnomes are a little crazy, little left of center, if you will, and their names tend to be something rather ridiculous.
So I feel like the gnomes, the best. You could sum it up the way Ted did, or I would just say gnomes are fun. They're all about fun. They like to have fun, and naming is like a game that they play amongst themselves. So if you guys have any more questions about gnomes, feel free to check the comments below or ask your questions in the comments below. The great community at Nerdarchy will help you out, or if we ourselves don't get to those questions. So feel free to ask. While you're at it, comment, like, and share.
You can check out the articles over at nerdarchy.com.
Or you can check us out over on Facebook.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.